Welcome, writers, to the first in this series of videos where all we're going to be talking about is things that we can do to make sentences better. Most of the time, that's going to involve strategies that we can use to get our full message across in as few words as possible, and to do everything in our power not to waste the reader's time. That's what this entire series of writing tips is designed to do. Give you the tools you need to get your full message across in as few words as possible, and don't waste the reader's time. I had the pleasure of working as an editor for many years, so I've seen a lot of sentences in my time, good and bad. I've seen the stumbling blocks and the bad habits that some writers can get into that prevents them from getting their message across in the most effective or persuasive way. So these tips come from years of looking at sentences, identifying what's wrong with them, and fixing them so that the writer's message can come across the way they intended it in their mind, but it just didn't make it onto the page that way. And maybe that's something you've experienced in your own writing. So there are a number of tips that I'm going to share, but none of those tips will mean anything if we don't take responsibility for how we put words on the page. And that's what this episode is all about, responsibility. If our goal is to create documents that connect with readers, that influence their thinking in some way, then we have a responsibility to put words on the page in a way that keeps the reader's interest. And nothing will turn a reader off faster than bad writing and ill-constructed sentences. For the purposes of this series, I'm going to assume that you have a working understanding of grammar and punctuation. That's not what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to assume you know the rules of writing. But just knowing the rules of writing doesn't make you a good writer any more than knowing the rules of tennis makes you Serena Williams. The best test of good writing is whether the reader can understand your message without having to stop and try to figure out what you're saying. So let's kick off our conversation about our responsibility as writers with this quote. To achieve mastery, we must take action, ownership, and responsibility for our choices. I'm pretty sure Will Craig, the first baseman for the Pirates, wasn't talking about writing when he said that, but this quote is so relevant to what we're talking about because writing is just that, a series of choices. Is this the right word? Are my paragraphs in the right order? Is this too long or too short? It's almost never too short. Just like life, writing well is about making good choices. So let's look at some sentences and see if we think these writers took responsibility for how they put words on the page. The first sentence comes from a corporate communication. The consequence is that it contributed to the problem and may lead to another failure, thus hindering organizational learning. The failure here is not that there's a $sign in the middle of the word problem or that learning is spelled with an M. The lapse in responsibility is that the writer didn't go back and proofread her work. Simply putting words on the page is not writing. It's not writing until we've gone back and reread every word, until we've given our stamp of approval to every word. Only then do we release it to the reader. And we all make mistakes. We all have typos at one time or another. 1 or 2 typos in a long document isn't the end of the world, but 2 typos so close together as in this sentence is a red flag to the reader. Anyone reading the sentence is thinking, this writer is either lazy or just doesn't care about her message. And worst of all, we've now wasted the reader's time. And that is the kiss of death for a writer. Once you waste the reader's time, you might as well call it a day because that reader is never coming back. So an important part of our responsibility as a writer is to proofread our work. We need to proofread our work before it's published, printed, mailed, or released to the reader in any form. This next sentence comes from a conference brochure. The conference is scheduled to take place in Weber Auditorium on November 30th, 2023 of this year. Plan to arrive at 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm showing these 2 sentences together because they demonstrate the same aspect of our writing responsibility, and that is redundancy. repeating the same information when it's not necessary. In the first sentence, I'm looking at 2023 of this year, and in the second sentence, 7 a.m. in the morning. If you say 2023, you don't have to include of this year, and if you say 7 a.m., you don't have to include in the morning because a.m. means in the morning. This is something that creeps into written documents in many different ways, and while it might be a good idea to repeat some information throughout the course of a document for emphasis or to reinforce learning or understanding, it's not a good idea to repeat information within the same sentence. It wastes the reader's time. So an important part of our responsibility as a writer is to look for redundancies within sentences and remove them whenever we see them. Okay, this next sentence comes from a corporate website. The site provides information about tuition reimbursement as well as scholarship and financial aid opportunities. The failure in responsibility here has to do with credibility, our credibility as a writer. I'm looking at the words financial aid. In this instance, aid should be spelled A-I-D as in help or support, not A-I-D-E as in someone's personal assistant. It's a good idea to assume that the reader knows more about writing than we do. Now, not everybody does, but many people are good spellers, they know their way around grammar and punctuation, so we need to write to the highest common denominator of readers. We need to be absolutely sure that the words we use mean what we think they mean. In this case, the reader doesn't know if this is a typo or whether the writer just doesn't know the difference between aid and aid. We've created doubt in the mind of the reader as to whether we are a reliable source of information. If we don't know the difference between aid and aid, or care enough to find out, maybe there are other things we don't know or care about. Doubt is not what we're going for when we're trying to get our message across. We're looking for buy-in, not doubt. So an important part of our responsibility as a writer is to make sure that every word means what we think it means. And if we're not 100% sure, we need to do the work. We're the writer. We need to figure it out. Okay, this next sentence comes from an online catalog. Made from superfine ABS plastic, our appliances are super easy to clean, so they're ready to reuse immediately. In this example, I'm looking at the word super, which is spelled two different ways in the same sentence. In both cases, it should be S-U-P-E-R. Again, it could be a typo, it could be a spelling error, maybe the writer was enjoying a cocktail. Whatever the case, what we're talking about here is consistency. If we're not sure about any aspect of a word, it's our responsibility to figure it out before it gets anywhere near the reader. There are reference books and websites that can help us determine what a particular word should be so that we can use it correctly and consistently throughout the entire document. When we talk about consistency, we're talking about spelling, capitalization, abbreviations, hyphens, apostrophes. Everything that we put on the page needs to be consistent. Every time we let inconsistencies into our writing, we're making the reader work harder than they have to. We're taking them out of the message, and now they're questioning our ability as a writer. They're thinking, wait, did she spell this that way the first time? Or did she hyphenate this the last time she used that word? And that's not what we want our reader to be thinking about. So an important part of our responsibility as a writer is to be consistent. Okay, one last example. It was an effective solution, but the process was more involved than she remembered. Filming was suspended because there were more clouds than sun. In both of these sentences, I'm looking at the word then, because in both of these sentences, the word should be than, T-H-A-N. And this is a common mistake. We've probably all made this mistake at one time or another. To this day, whenever I use the word peak, P-E-A-K or P-E-E-K, I can never remember which spelling is correct for the sentence that I'm constructing, so I have to go to the dictionary every time I use that word and check to make sure I'm using the right one. And there are a lot of pesky words like that out there. You know, affect, effect, flout, flaunt, ensure, assure, insure. Every time in each one of those cases, the word you choose depends on the context of the sentence. So we need to get in the habit of questioning those pesky words whenever we're not sure if it's the right word or a distant cousin of the right word. But here's the thing. Questioning the pesky words is just the beginning. If we're serious about crafting better, stronger sentences, we need to get in the habit of questioning every word, not just the pesky ones. Only by questioning every word do we get to that place where we can get our full message across in as few words as possible. I know that that's easier said than done for a lot of writers, but hopefully that's where I come in. I want to help you develop your writer's eye so that you can look at your own documents and see all the opportunities to cut, trim, tighten, and improve your sentences. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for and then knowing what to do when you see those opportunities. So perhaps the most important part of our responsibility as writers is to question every word. That's what this series is designed to do, help you figure out how to tighten sentences by questioning every word. All right, let's look at some takeaways from today's episode. We talked about the importance of getting your full message across in as few words as possible. We don't want to waste the reader's time by putting more words on the page than are absolutely necessary. We want to carefully proofread our work. We want to look for redundancies within sentences and remove them. We want to make sure every word on the page means what we think it means. We want to be consistent with everything we put on the page, and we want to question every word. I'd like to end with this thought. If our message is important enough that we're taking the time and effort to sit down and put it in writing, we might as well go all in and craft that message with the strongest, tightest sentences we can. I want to help you develop the skills to do just that, so if your curiosity is piqued, P-I-Q-U-E-D, I hope you'll join me for the next episode when we're going to be talking about less is more, an essential part of crafting stronger sentences. See you then.